Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. It's a damn busy time in the channel. We have another video on Epic going up today, The Division tomorrow, but for now, Google Stadia. I mean, first, it sounds like the brand name for a sugar substitute, but past that, it certainly has got headlines promising a number of innovations that really do seem quite attractive. Indeed, there's a lot to love about what Google are trying to do, but as always, there are multiple sides, and there's a bit of a fundamental problem that Google are going to have to grapple with. But before we get into that stuff, let's talk about the platform and the promise. So, Stadia is Google's game streaming platform. Leveraging their massive network architecture, Google plan to integrate gaming into just about everything that they can. And one of the fundamental things that they seek to overcome is a big problem for many games on PC, and that is the technical barrier to entry. Well, with Stadia, everyone is basically going to have access to at least one custom Vega 56. Google have talked about how overall one Stadia instance has more power than both modern consoles put together, but that's almost underplaying their hand in a way, as some games will be able to use multiple GPUs in the data center, meaning that the sky somewhat is the limit in terms of access to horsepower. Well, realistically, probably it's the developer's ability to harness that, and it's something that Google are calling elastic compute, which seems to make a lot of sense. By being able to give everyone access to top-end hardware, they essentially open up many games to audiences who would not otherwise have the hardware to play them, and that even includes console players, as Stadia will run on your phone, your tablet, or a Chromecast. Capability-wise, Stadia is going to be launching at 4K 60 with future support for 8K 120. That seems insane, but it's worth remembering that latency and bandwidth, they're just not the same thing. Yes, 4K 60 will require an excellent connection with high bandwidth on your part, but fundamentally, latency is going to be a problem felt by all connections. That said, currently, Stadia is able to trade blows with an Xbox One X locally, which is kind of insane. But basically, yeah, frame rate and quality can scale up based on your internet speed, but latency will not, and more on latency later, as it really is the Achilles heel. Still, for people with the connection to handle it, Stadia will outperform modern consoles, delivering 4K 60 with HDR color, bar compression, and that is the thing. Netflix 4K will look worse than a 1080p Blu-ray. Resolution is one thing, but bitrate is another, and you all know that YouTube 4K looks terrible compared to a 4K Blu-ray. It may beat a PS4 Pro or an Xbox One X on resolution and frame rate, but it may not beat them, and currently doesn't beat them, on image quality because of compression. It does have other benefits though. As an example, opening Assassin's Creed Odyssey takes 6.68 seconds as compared to 24.44 seconds on an Xbox One X. Yep, surprisingly, Google can afford fast SSDs. Indeed, storage-wise, they've said the developers will have access to petabytes of data. Now, that's traditionally, all this stuff has traditionally been seen as one of the strong points of a streaming service, like for all of them. So what makes Stadia different? Well, they're a lot more than a streaming service. Stadia may just be that to users, but to developers, Stadia is a platform. That means that there can be platform-specific features that can enable new types of games. So, hear about this. Whenever you play a multiplayer game, your client, the client is running your computer. It then talks to the server, which is, of course, far away. Therefore, you have latency between the client and the server. Now, this is experienced for all players connected to the server, and it has led to developers making, say, lag compensation systems for their games. You'll often find that in shooters, the lag compensation will favor the shooter, and that's why you can be shot when you're technically behind a wall, because sure, on your screen you were behind a wall, but nope, not on your opponent's screen. That happens a lot in Apex Legends. Well, with Stadia, it would be different. The client is on Stadia. The server is on Stadia. That essentially eliminates the client-server latency problem, and additionally will allow for multiplayer games at a far greater scale. You could probably have a battle royale with 10,000 players, for example. Now, while client-server latency is less of a problem, there still is, latency to deal with. There's the client-to-screen latency, of course, because the client is in Stadia, so that's the Stadia-to-you latency. Now, this is something that you do deal with on all devices anyway, but typically it's just your device latency plus your display latency, which in PC, of the good monitors, between, 1 and 10 milliseconds, and of course far, far more for a television, especially if game mode isn't enabled. Well, with this, you've got your screen latency plus the latency of getting the image from the Stadia data center. So while there may be perfect client-server sync, there still won't be perfect sync between what players see and their latency, and indeed there will be input latency that'll come with that. So this may be a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it certainly is an innovation. And I mean, The latency of Stadia seems to be about the latency of an Xbox One X. So if you're playing Apex Legends on an Xbox One X, you're actually dealing with hardware and screen latency that is the same as Stadia overall. So for a lot of console players, it will flat out just be an upgrade. Importantly though, it is a platform benefit that can change how games are made. You have access to near infinite power and perfect client-server sync, so games that are designed for massive player counts are far more possible from a network architecture perspective, especially if Google make that easy for devs, or hell, even games that are designed to take multiple perspectives into account for multiple players. After all, seeing what your ally sees is just a matter of giving their Stadia stream over to you. So indeed, you could have one game experience running 3 Stadia instances or something like that. Now, all of this opens up new opportunities for design, and that is why Jade Raymond was hired. She is going to be heading up Google's first-party developer initiative, and indeed their own studio with that group focusing on creating games that leverage the Stadia platform. Past this, Stadia is designed to be extremely social. You could join a streamer's lobby if they let you. You could look up a guide from within a game. You can run split-screen multiplayer easily. After all, it's just a matter of how many Stadia videos Google pipe down to you. You can easily share content. It actually supports save states, so that's something that fans of, say, emulated NES games will be very aware of. You can pause a game and, as an example, send its save state to a friend, if a dev supports it, I imagine, allowing them to open it and attempt the same challenge that you just did, all just with a regular GOO.gl link. And that brings us on to the user experience of Stadia. It can have you in a game within 5 seconds. And this could actually be massive for the advertising business. They mentioned a simple version of with an Ubisoft trailer, but imagine a game advert that ends with a Stadia link, a save state link. You click on the link, maybe it's of a bit of thrilling gameplay, and you play like a little slice of the game as a kind of demo that's built into a video ad. That would really open up new possibilities for the advertising industry, so that's a bit odd to think about, I suppose. Now, one interesting thing is the Wi-Fi controller. It actually connects to Stadia, such that if it connects on your phone, but then you open up Stadia on your Chromecast or your computer, the controller never loses connection, making the whole experience rather seamless. Now, it all sounds quite good. Access to top-end hardware to play games on regardless of device. It could open up types of gaming to a broader audience, giving everyone a good experience instead of just those who can afford it. Now, Stadia is going to launch this year, but there's a lot more to talk about here. Latency. Yeah, we all knew that this was going to be the main problem here. It's both good and bad for Stadia, but you know what? It's actually mostly good, spookily so. First, these numbers are in milliseconds. 60 FPS has a frame being delivered every 13.3 milliseconds, so it's worth keeping that very important number into account. Digital Foundry's testing for Project Stream, the pre-test for Stadia, gave 188 ms, and their Stadia demo gave 166 ms, meaning they were able to shave off a frame. Now, the rest of this table compares a PC running at 30 and 60 and both main consoles. Now, they were testing on an LG C8 television, so they do have another side of their table that takes display lag in to give you a more fair representation of everything. And if you look at it, well, Stadia on a Chromebook has about the same button-to-pixel lag as an Xbox One X local. And that's a very impressive feat. Now, yes, it's far slower than a PC at 60, especially if that PC was on a gaming monitor of 5 ms or below display latency. But overall, this tells us that yes, Stadia is well behind a PC on a quality gaming monitor, but it's shockingly close. It seems to be delivering an on-par experience to a console hooked up to a TV with game mode enabled on the TV. Now look, this means that Stadia is not a threat to high-end PC gaming right now, but it actually can compete with mid to low-end PC gaming, and it is able to trade blows with both consoles. And that's mad. Stadia actually had a worst-case scenario demo that was a 15 megabyte DSL connection that was very noisy. Now, it reduced quality to 720p and still got pretty decent latency. Now, it's worth mentioning that Stadia was running Assassin's Creed Odyssey at 1080. Now, the stream was at 60, but the game was at 30. It is going to launch with 4K 60, which might actually reduce latency because you're measuring button-to-pixel latency. Well, if you're doing that in 30 FPS versus 60, if you do it in 60, you're going to maybe save another frame or two. So if it can do that, it actually will be ahead of an Xbox One X on a television, mostly due to that frame rate change. So Microsoft and Sony better be aiming for 60 FPS as the standard next gen. Now, this was using Google setup hardware. Though it's fair to say that it's not massively different from the Project Stream beta the Digital Foundry tested using a home connection. Google also claimed that the Wi-Fi controller will help to reduce perceived latency as well. And then according to Digital Foundry's reviewer, who by the way is a great guy who I really trust, he's great in hardware, makes amazing content, well, he says it's a close to local experience. And that's insane. Yeah, Stadia is not messing around here, and it's certainly ticked off the CEO and co-founder of Rainway, another streaming platform. They pointed out that they've been doing in-browser streaming for a while now, and that Google's demos are not exactly reflective of their launch commitments and performance claims, rightly saying that buzzwords like 4K are fine, but the quality depends on connection and encode quality. And that absolutely is true. I mean, he then does just go into an advert for his company and product, which is totally his right, but he does capture many of the core points of skepticism and criticism. Personally, I'm also very worried about just being assimilated into Google, and if Stadia does well, there's a massive worry about competition. It's that thing where you get the nerds to build amazing tech, and then the strategists upstairs use it to monopolize and do things that customers may not like. So I'll probably give Rainway a try. After all, we have a 350 down, 20 ms latency business connection in the office, so why the hell not? But overall, that's the view on Google Stadia. I'm worried about Google as a company, and if this ends up being a monopoly, that's a dark as hell future for gaming. This is fine as another option, but if this gets too big, we've got to watch out, right? We have these big tech monopolies are a massive problem, and I would really worry, because think about it this way: if Stadia was to do so well that the consumer GPU market decreased in size, guess what? You're going to see Nvidia and AMD put less resources into consumer GPUs. That means that non-Stadia games are not going to be targeting as high quality visuals. So there are long-term, I think more academic concerns that could be a very real problem that we'd end up contending with if any service goes, monopolistic, especially though if it's a Google one, because I don't really trust or like Google that much as a company. So there you go, it's an interesting thing. The tech seems truly awesome. I mean, in the actual use of that word, it seems very cool. The fact that on probably my connection in this office, that I could have less latency than playing an Xbox One X natively, that is insane. But of course, there's all the other problems too. So let me know what you think about Stadia, and I'm interested in two main perspectives. If you're a high-end PC gamer like me, right, you've got beefy hardware, what do you think about this? But more importantly, if you have, say, a 750 Ti rig, or maybe you're primarily a console gamer and you just, play stuff that can be done on an integrated GPU and PC, I'd really be interested in seeing what you think about something like Stadia, because that's a perspective that's different to mine. The value proposition for Stadia is a lot stronger for that market than it is for I guess, the one that I'm a part of, so I'd really love to hear those perspectives. With that though, thank you very much for watching this video. Be sure to check out the Epic Game Store exclusivity one with the Outer Worlds, because man, that is one spicy meatball. And with that, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.